every conflict that you see in logistics is actually an opportunity. I'm going to share a very personal bit when I started my career. Uh, I used to avoid conflict like anything. It was crazy. This was right at the beginning of my career when I was in Dubai. If something would go wrong with a shipment, I used to cringe speaking to a client. It wasn't about ownership, actually. I was very keen to solve the problem. However, my weakness was addressing it and communicating it with the client objectively. Over a period of time, I realized that I was getting quite defensive about it. So then, as you take that pressure and as you're on that receiving side, I was actually pushing back and getting feeling a bit cornered, getting a bit emotional. Here are a few things that I learned where I solved this over a period of time, and you can try and apply this for yourself. So, first one was to stay calm. And even when the client got angry, I tried and kept a very calm, easy face because it was not personal. I immediately preemptively started owning the problem in front of the client and effectively communicating this to the client that I understand the problem and I understand the pressure. I understand what they are going through within their own organization. One critical portion that helped me was to delineate the problem between controllable and non controllable. As a logistics company, as a forwarding company, as a trucking company, there are certain things which are completely within your control, which is your own mistake. And there are certain things which are just not within your control. If there's a snowstorm at New York terminal, it is not in your control. And if something goes wrong with the shipment, or there's a delay, or there's a shutout, then you are not in control. So separating this out from a mistake that was made by your own firm or something that was out of your control and communicating this effectively to client made a very big difference. One other step that I took was the tone that I used never ever implied that I was taking the problem lightly. Even though you do not have control over a snowstorm in New York, for example, you cannot make the client feel that you're not serious about the problem. You understand the seriousness of the problem and you're trying your utmost within reasonable grounds to solve the problem. Over a period of few years later, one thing that kind of settled in my stomach was that I lost all fear of losing a client because of a problem. I realized that when I was very fearful of losing a client, I tended to be quite emotional about it. So I'm extremely passionate about not losing a client. However, that box could not be crossed. I would not go out that box. And that actually, in some way, unbeknownst to me, changed the way I was communicating whenever there was uh, a problem, whenever there was an issue. One thing that you will see a lot in our industry is that you get pushed to take commercial decisions. You are pushed to write off money. Oh, give me $500 off, or give me $100 off, or just don't charge me for this shipment. In most occasions, you cannot afford this. So initially, when I was new to the industry many, 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 many moons ago, I was very keen to go to my manager, go to my operations team. Hey, let's write this off. Let's do this. Let's do that. Then, when the fear of losing the client, when the objective way of handling any conflict came through, I realized that you just could not make these commercial decisions. It was just not viable. Therefore, I was like very, 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 I was leaning so much towards the end that, there would be hardly 3, 4 percentage of the shipments where which has a problem. You would write off some amount of money. That even less than that sometimes. Yeah. One thing that you will see is that you cannot come across as indifferent. This is one thing that I see quite a lot in many salespeople, many account managers, many customer service people, that even with the right intent, sometimes they just come across as indifferent. This is something you can train yourself with, and you can use the correct tone in order for you to get away from this um, feeling that you pass across to the customer. So, last but not least, the tendency in our industry is always this, that the competitor doesn't make these mistakes. These big companies don't make errors. These other forwarders have excellent relationships with the terminals and the lines and the trucks, and they just don't make the mistakes my company is making. This is the worst feeling that you can have in the pit of your stomach, and you have to remove this completely from the bottom of your stomach, not just by from what you're saying, but also from the bottom of your stomach. The moment you go through these things and get a clear understanding in how to handle this problem, it is actually an opportunity. You get closer to the customer. If you just proactively pick up the phone and call the client, explain the mistake, tell them what you're doing, tell them what your company is pulling out all the stops for to ensure that the problem is solved, you actually win a lot of brownie points with the customer. Because it's often enough that you are waiting for the customer to call you to solve that problem. Do the reverse. Just pick up the phone, call them, and go through it, and the relationship changes completely. Hope you found this helpful, and if you did, I would love it if you can subscribe and share. Thank you.